Today I'm designing a curved cafeteria from Rhino modeling to AI-driven visuals. We'll model the geometry, generate new perspective views using Nano Banana, and animate between shots using Kling's keyframe tool. This is a practical workflow for architects and designers who want more expressive visuals without long render times. Alright, and once here in Rhino, the first thing that I'm going to do is to create a rectangle that is going to serve us as a reference for our length and height of our architecture or design. So I'm going to go ahead and type in polyline on the command bar, and I'll also make sure that down here the grid snap is turned on. This way I'll be able to snap to the vertices of the grid. I'm going to click once on the origin, and to define the height, I'll be using the y-axis on the right view and type in 15. I'm currently working with meters, so that's going to be 15 meters by 25 meters. If you're not working with this same units, you can go ahead and type in 15m or 25m. I'm going to be clicking once, then down here, and closing this rectangle. In order to close the rectangle, let's make sure that the O snap is turned on alongside the end option on the bottom left side. And there we go. Now, as our design is going to be curved, I'm going to be using the control point curve tool that you can find on the left side. And let's start drawing inside our reference. And to have a little bit more of freedom, I'm going to make sure that the grid snap and ortho options are turned off down here. And I'll be clicking once. And now we can just go ahead and create something like this. It doesn't have to be perfect because later on we can adjust the control points. So if I click once on this curve, you'll see that we end up with these control points that we can move around using our gumball. If your gumball is not activated, you can just go ahead and click gumball on the bottom bar. So this is going to be basically our design for the facade. But now I also want to make sure to create an entrance gesture for this design. So what I'm going to do is to go into the top view here and create a second curve with a control point curve, which I'm going to be using in order to create a curvature on this other side. That way, I'm going to be defining an entrance. And you can see that I'm able to snap to these control points, and that is because I have the O snap turned on at the bottom. So let's turn it off and start drawing. So my facade is going to basically be straight on this side, but at the top here, I want this to be curved. Something around this point. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because we can now use our gumball in order to define it. If you want to delete one of these points, the only thing that you have to do is to select them and press the delete key. And I think I'm going to be deleting this control point at the end. Now for our next step, I'm going to go to a perspective view. And what I want to do now is for our curve to follow this reference curve that we have created in here. However, in this case, I want this curve to be the other way around. So we have to rotate it. I'm going to be clicking once on this rotate tool on the gumball and type in 180. We no longer need our reference rectangle here, so let's delete it too. Now the command that we need, it's called CRV to view or curve from two views. And we need to follow what the command bar is asking for. In this case, select the first curve, which is going to be this one. And then it's telling us to select the second curve, which is going to be this one right here. And you can see that our curve has now followed the path that we have created, which is great. At this point, it would be better if we try and close this overall geometry. But before that, I'm going to be deleting these two because they're only on the way now. And I'll select this one and use the mirror command. Now I'm going to have to activate the O snap tool again. Click here once and we can mirror it like so. Maybe this is a little bit too thick, so we can go ahead and select these two curves, join them together, and by using the red square on our gumball, we can make it a little bit thinner. This looks better. Last but not least, we have to close this curve. So I'm just going to do that by using a polyline. And of course, we need to join them together. Now there's a couple of tools that are going to be letting us create a surface out of this closed curve. Let's try the first one, which is the patch command. So type in patch, and this window will pop up. The only thing that you have to do in here is to click on OK. And there's our surface, but as you can see, it's not really that perfect because it's really not following the geometry of our curve. So I'm going to go back a step with Ctrl+Z, and in order to be a little bit more precise with this, what I'm going to do is to create a curve network. In order to do so, we need to create a network of curves, of course, and we can start doing it by using a simple polyline. Also, make sure that within the OSnap tool, you have the perpendicular option on, and it would be better if we go to a top view, and you can see that we are not being that precise in here. Unfortunately, this is not symmetrical, and we need to fix this. So what I'm going to do is go back a few steps until we have two different curves in here, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this half, type in mirror, and we can fix this really quick. Like so. Grab all the curves, join them together, and make the shape a bit thinner. I'm going to also be turning on the ortho down here so we can be a little bit more precise. Alright, now back to a perspective view. And in order to finish off our network, we have to create a curve that goes through the middle of all of these that we have created. And the best tool to do that is called the interpolate curve. Make sure that within the OSnap now, you have the mid option on, and we can start snapping these control points to the midpoint of all of these curves. Last but not least, we have to divide the outline in half. We can do this by selecting it, typing in split, and using this curve as a splitting object. And you can see that we end up with two halves here. And now what we can do is to select all of them, go into surface up here, and click on curve network. All of these options are going to be just fine. I'm going to go ahead and just click OK, and we end up with a perfect surface. Okay, great. Now I'm going to extrude this surface all the way down, and I'm going to be aligning the bottom surface to the construction plane. We can do this by clicking once on the scale option of our gumball, type in 0, and drag it all the way up here. I'm going to be a little bit more precise about this, so I'm going to go to a front view and drag it right onto the construction plane. Now on the right view, what we can do is to go ahead and pick the control point curve again, and we can start defining our facade or design a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is to leave the back area closed, and then I'll drag the curve all the way up here like this. Now by using the control points, we can refine this gesture like this. So what I'm trying to do in here is to basically create an opening that welcomes the pedestrians passing by. Alright, this should do. Let's go back to a perspective view, and we have to align all of these control points. So we can basically follow the same strategy by clicking once on the scaling tool, type in 0, and we're going to be using this curve to cut through this geometry here. As you can see, if I use the cut tool from our gumball, nothing happens. And this is because this curve, if I go to a lateral view, is not really going through the whole geometry. So we need to go ahead and fix that. I'll just scale it a little bit to the sides and then dragging it upwards just a tiny little bit. This will ensure that we are actually going through the whole geometry. Going to go back to perspective now, grab the cut tool and slice it through, like so. And there we go. This is exactly the gesture that I wanted. However, I don't want the bottom surface, so we can select it with Ctrl+Shift and delete it. Next, I want to go ahead and create a slab to basically have two floors. In order to be a little bit more precise about this, I'm going to go to the top view here, and we no longer need all of these curves, so we can type in Cell CRV, which is select curves, and delete them. Now, of course, I want the slab to follow the same geometry that we have created in here. So on the perspective view, I can again select the top surface and type in dot border. This will duplicate the border on this surface and then align all of the control points onto our construction plane down here. I'm going to be typing move so that I can snap it to the bottom vertex down here, and then we can click once on the z-axis and we can type in 5.5 meters, and this is looking pretty good. Now we need to give it a thickness, and that's pretty simple with extrude tool on our gumball. This is going to be negative 0.5, and obviously I don't want the slab to be sticking out like that, and again we need to make sure that it's actually going through the whole object. So split, and there we go, we managed to get rid of that piece. Let's also clean up the model a little bit. Now we have our initial geometry, and the only thing left to do is to start giving it a little bit more of detail. On the top floor, I'm going to only be using glass, And on the bottom, we'll have some kind of structure holding this up. I'm going to be starting off with the glass. So again, dot border. Obviously, we can have the glass on the outline of this slab. So I'm going to be typing in offset and giving it a separation of around 50 centimeters. Let's grab this curve now, extrude it up. So again, the same workflow. I'm going to grab our glass object, type in split, and cut it with our main shape or geometry. And just delete the top part. Okay, this is already looking pretty nice. All right, now let's work on the structure down here. The structure is going to be basically an arch, because if I introduce a rectangle, it's going to break our design intention a little bit. So we need to be careful with that. I will be starting with a polyline, so we can go ahead and type in polyline. And I'll start off by clicking on my slab, bringing it down here. And this is going to be around 0.5 or probably 1 meter in width. I'll drag it all the way to this side, more or less where we have this intersection going on, and then drag it down. It would be also a good idea to have the ortho turned on, so we can snap each 90 degrees, and we can basically define the width of the structure down here. And finally, we can close it like so. So we can go ahead and pick the tools on the left side, in this case, the control point curve. Now what I'm aiming for in here, it's usually called Vierendeel structure. It is usually used on bridges, and in order to define this better, let's isolate these curves by selecting them, typing in isolate, and getting rid of this sharp edges in here. I want to smooth out this corner over here. Therefore, I'll be typing in fillet, and by using a radius of 0.2, we can try and smooth these out. This is a little bit too tiny, so we might need to increase it to 0.7. And there we go. This looks great. Let's join all of these together. And back to perspective view, I'll be extruding this by 0.5 now. Now type in show in order to show the hidden objects in here, and we can place this on this other corner like this. Obviously, we don't want this sticking out like this, so we just need to go ahead and move it inward. And if we want this arch structure to be a little bit more proportional, what we can do is to pick the edges with Ctrl+Shift and this back surface and drag it all the way to the back. Maybe not that much, just a tiny little bit. Remember that, of course, this is a very conceptual design. Now I want to obviously create an entrance, for which I'm going to be starting off with a simple polyline, which I'll snap to this side, then to this other one, select it, and type in extrude CRV. I can snap it down here and extrude it all the way to the back side. Of course, we don't want this sticking out again. So as usual, we can make sure that this is intersecting like this. Type in split, grab our geometry here, and get rid of this bottom part. Now I can select the bottom surface, type in move, and move it all the way over here. And there we go, almost done. The only thing left to do now is to create maybe some window frames. And the best way to do that is by using the contour command. So let me just go ahead and isolate this geometry. Type in contour, I'll grab the midpoint and define the direction in which I want these contour lines to appear. And then we can select the object, press the spacebar, and this will allow us to repeat the same command. Now using the other axis, which is going to be our z-axis, we can define now the other direction, and again type in 1, and of course we need some window frames in here, which is going to be on the x-axis. And there we go. I'm going to get rid of these curves which make no sense. And last but not least, I can type in cell CRV, then pipe, and the width of this pipe is going to be the width that you usually see for the window frames, which is around 0.05 meters. Now cell CRV to get rid of all of the curves, and if I go to an Arctic view, you'll see that I end up with the window frames like so. Now these seem a little bit too thick, so I'm going to go back a step with Ctrl+Z, but I think we can get rid again of some of them because there are too many. And there we go, much better. And we also need a certain thickness for our curved element. And the command that is going to do that for us is called offset srf, which is offset surface. I'm going to give it a subtle thickness of 0.2, which is 20 centimeters. And we can get rid of this top part here. And for the final touch, I'll just be adding a few staircases and a couple of surrounding buildings. And finally, we can type in view capture to file. I'm going to use a resolution of 1080 by 1080, so a squared format. And let's also make sure that our design is actually centered. So I'm going to be taking the camera a little bit to the side here. And also, it might be a good idea to change the camera lens. And we can do that by typing in properties. And on the lens length, we can type in 17. Let's close this tab and zoom in a little bit. Again, view capture to file. And I think this looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit to this side. Maybe zooming out a little bit. Okay, this looks awesome. I'm going to click on OK and save it somewhere on my PC. Okay, so now let's render out our image using AI. I'm going to be using Nano Banana Pro. You can get access to Nano Banana Pro on dreamina.capcut.com. However, in my case, I'm going to be using something different. The app that I'll be using is called VizMaker. And why I'm going to be using this app? Because it's very efficient. It works with nodes, so it makes everything much simple. It is, however, a paid app, but you can get a free trial out of it. If you want to use it too, you can head over to vizmaker.vizacademy.co.uk. So what I'm going to do first is to click and drag our image in here. And on the right sidebar, I'm going to make sure that on the render mode, I'm using the image editor. On the image editor, VizMaker has Nano Banana Pro, Nano Banana, and Seedream V4, which for me are the best ones out there on the market. So now I'll be sticking with Nano Banana Pro. The resolution is going to be at 2K and the aspect ratio, I'll maintain it as squared. We also have some prompt presets in here that you can use, such as view to render, or you can completely change the environment to winter, autumn, or even add a golden hour. So many useful prompt presets in here. And the first thing that I'm going to tell Nano Banana is to render this image, apply materials to this 3D model. We need concrete, black metal, glass, and a brick for the center building. Let's go ahead and click on make. Now one good thing about VizMaker is that it works with nodes. So if I go ahead and click make again, you'll see that I'm going to instantly start generating multiple variations of this. Okay, and to speed things up, we can actually mix these two together using Photoshop. So I'm going to double click here, then enlarge, right click and save as. And the same thing for this other one. Right click, save selected media. Alright, so once here in Photoshop, what I'm going to do is select the first layer, which has this glass entrance, and apply a layer mask. Then with Ctrl+I, I can invert such mask, and by pressing the B key, I can activate the brush tool here in Photoshop. Make sure that you're sticking with the white color, because my mask is set as black. So you need to select the opposite color of what your mask is. And then I can just go ahead and move it and place it where it has to be, somewhere around this area. And by using the opposite color, which is this black color, I can start erasing the parts in which I don't want to see this part of the entrance. So we keep everything nice and clean. I also want to get rid of the brick stairs, which don't make much sense. I prefer to have them as concrete. One thing that I also liked about this image was that it implemented a little bit of lighting on the top floor, and we can also see a brick wall there, which is a nice gesture. Okay, so once we've got it, we can go to File, then Export As, and save it anywhere on your PC. So back on VizMaker, I'm going to tell it to give more detail to the buildings on the sides, make them modern, change their material, but avoid applying the same material we have on the main building. And this bit is important because I want our building to be the main focus. Now add windows, door, etc. Don't change their height. And we can send it away using Nano Banana Pro again. And all of these seem pretty nice, but I think I'm going to be sticking with this one. Now for the next part, I'm going to start telling it the program that we have in here. I was thinking that this could be a cafe bar. Therefore, I'll be using this next prompt, which is, this is a bar cafe, give more life to the interior of the building, only on the interior main building. Because I don't want Nano Banana to start placing people or activity around this area. Again, it's better to go with 2 variations to keep everything more efficient. And this one is pretty interesting. We can still see this gesture of our structure there and how it's using it as part of the design. So having this nice open space to the public would be a good idea in this case. So I'm going to be sticking with this one. For the next part, we actually need to get rid of the buildings on the sides because the objective is to also start creating the architectural plan of our building, of our design. So pretty straightforward, remove the side buildings. Okay, and it has done it perfectly. Now because we have a simplified version, it's going to be more easy for us to create the architectural plan. I'm going to double click on this image and prompt create an architectural plan of this building. Let's send it a couple of times and see which version works better. In the meantime, we can start adding even more detail to our render in here because we are lacking a little bit of foreground detail and also a background. Therefore, a simple prompt like add roads, cars, and background can do the trick. And we have our plans ready. I'm going to be checking out this one by clicking on enlarge. And of course, the ground floor doesn't make much sense. Let's see the other version. And the other version obviously is not going to work out. So we might need to try a couple of more times until we get something more coherent. And while we wait for that, you can see that our render is done. And this is going to be working perfectly. I really like this version. However, we can double check the other one, which is over here. And of course, the sky is not right at all. So we can double click and delete this version. Now we have our plans ready too. And this one makes much more sense. I'm only looking for the second floor plan, for which I'm going to just say, delete the plan of the ground floor. Leave only the second floor plan. While we wait for that one, I can go back to the render that we liked, which is this one, and I'm looking for a top isometric view. Change the camera to a top isometric view. I'm going to be deleting all of these floor plans so that we end up with a cleaner canvas, and we can bring these nodes over here. And of course, I'm going to tell it to render out this floor plan. Leave plain white background. We have our top isometric view ready, but it didn't really do a very good job here. I'm going to be waiting for this one to see if it can give us a better result. Alright, so unfortunately that didn't work either. So what I'm going to do is to double click on this floor plan again and be more specific with the prompt. Add materials to this floor plan. Keep it 2D, don't change proportions, floor plan render. Again, I'll be sending it 3 times this time. As for our isometric view, we might need to stick with this one. But in this case, obviously, we need to go ahead and delete the hanging plants on the exterior. For this, I'm going to be using the draw tool, then click on enlarge. And within the draw tool, we can see that we have a pen tool where we can mark certain objects like this one. So again, I'll mark those hanging plants and type in remove marked hanging plants. Alright, so once I do that, I'm going to wait for the results. And actually, we've managed to render out this plan finally. And I'm going to be sticking with this one, but I don't really like the floor. Therefore, we can tell it to replace the floor with light wooden flooring. And in here, we managed to remove the hanging plants, and it just looks great. And it's time for us to start saving the camera angles that work better. I'm going to start with this one, right click, save as. Then, of course, I'm going to jump to this other one over here. I'm also going to be saving this one, so save selected media. And last but not least, we have our new wooden floor ready, which is looking great. I'm also going to be saving this one. And in Photoshop, what I'm going to do is to place the floor plan right on the center. Alright, so this should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to move this to the center and also create a new layer by clicking on this icon right here and selecting all of these annotations and painting them white. This is pretty gray, so I'm going to be selecting this color like so, and again centering the image. And it's ready. Let's save it by going into export and export as. And now that we have our frames ready, we can jump into Kling AI. So once in here, you want to go to video, and I'm going to be adding the start and end frame. I'm also going to be using video 2.6. In this case, I'm going to be turning off native audio and uploading frame number 2. We don't really need a prompt because it's pretty straightforward. We want the first frame to move to the second frame. So I'll just click on generate. Now I want the second frame to be the first frame. By clicking in here, I can do that. I'll delete the first frame and upload our third frame, which is going to be our rendered floor plan. And this is the prompt that I'll be using. Change camera to top view, remove roof, and show architectural plan. This is how I'm currently combining Rhino and AI to explore architecture faster and more creatively. If this was useful, let me know in the comments and subscribe for more design workflows. And if you want the 3D model and the final animation, you can find them on my Patreon. The link is in the description. I'll see you in the next one.